Good morning again. It's Monday the 19th of March. I'm in Cyprus, but I'm scheduled to fly out this evening back to the UK. There's snow in the UK, there's all sorts of issues around the flights, so I think the rest of my day is going to be messing about getting travel information and car pickup and so on and so on. That's of no interest to you, but it's in my mind, so whether that'll reflect into the conversation I have with you now is who's to know. It's improvised, as I'm sure you realize by now. This topic of conversation, I've wanted to cover it before I leave Cyprus. I'm thinking of this set of tapes, and I think there's half a dozen of them or so, as the Cyprus Tapes. They have a particular style and flavor and background and all the rest of it. They're meant to be authentic communication. They're meant to be complementary to the dialogues, which I recorded in the UK with Corbyn in the last few months. So what do I really want to say now about conversation? Well, so far, I've talked to you about questions and answers and listening and active listening and analogies and things like that. Now, those are all things to use in a conversation. It's quite surprising how much conversation is actually driven by questions and answers. Hello, well, that would be obviously a greeting. And then, how are you today? That's a question. In transactional analysis terms, it's also a stroke. But we're going to come on to strokes. When I say strokes, it's that kind of stroke, not that kind of stroke. So when we come on to conversations, I think the first point I really want to make is if we're going to go on this journey from subconscious behavior to conscious behavior, we have to think about the purpose, our purpose for traveling on this journey at all, and the purpose of a specific conversation. Now, as I'm sure you realize, conversations can be of many sorts. They can be conversations you started yourself, that you wanted to have. So you went to some lengths perhaps to meet someone, or you just passed them in the street and you haven't seen them for a while, and it's just a social conversation. On the other hand, there may be something that's important to you that you want to seek out, and you telephone someone and make an arrangement, an appointment to go and see them. And that's a conversation as well when you go and see them. More structured conversations are things like interviews, where the people who are interviewing you just want to find out who you are. They want to know your personality. They want to know what type of person you are. And to some extent, they want to know what you know already. But in the business world, very often, people who are employing people, and I know this isn't just about employment, but in the big bad world out there, you are a potential source of information or a potential unit of production to them. And they want to know how effective you are now, because that's a quick win for them, or how effective they can make you with the appropriate training. And that whole business of them wanting you to become more effective and training you up in certain ways, especially soft skills, that's my area, and that's where I've spent the last 10 years of my career. But anyway, that's just a kind of vague intro to the whole idea of purpose. So when you're having your next conversation or next 3 or 4 conversations, think about who started that conversation. Did you start it? Did you have a purpose? Or did another person start it? And did they have a purpose? And do you know what their purpose is? Because people don't always disclose what their purpose is. They will open a conversation with you. And if they're a certain type of person, they might lead you down the garden path. That's an idiomatic expression, but it leads you on. And then at the end of that, towards the end of that conversation, they'll ask you for something or try and sell you something or who knows what. But purposeful conversation is a very powerful area to get control of. So you can use it yourself, hopefully for a win-win for both parties, but also to stop yourself being exploited. Now, I want to help you travel down this journey of conscious conversations. So I've talked to you about thinking about the purpose, either yours or the other person's. The next thing I'd like you to think about is, how do you feel about that conversation? Is it one where you're happy to be having it? Is it one where you're optimistic that it might have a good outcome, that wasn't there at the beginning? It's a journey towards something that you want. Is it a conversation you're worried about? I mean, again, in the work context, you may be going in to see your boss and asking for a raise. Now, in that conversation, you will have hopes that you're going to get the raise, and you'll have fears, because going and asking for a raise is always a matter of raising your profile a bit. You can't hide in the masses. You've got to go in and effectively justify yourself. And some people are good at that, and other people are nervous about it. And in fact, business often relies on the fact that most people are nervous about asking for a raise. And that's good for them in a way. It's bad, really, but they think it's good because it means that person goes on working for them. They don't have to give them more money. And what they do is they give the money to the people who come in and ask for a raise and are worth it. And you might be well worth it. You might be worth more than the other person, but you haven't asked for the raise. You haven't had the confidence, and so you just don't get the extra money. And that's the real world. That's the world we live in. And it's about how you feel about a conversation. So if you're going to start empowering yourself, you've got to think about the conversation and say, do I have hopes for this conversation, or am I afraid? And what's the balance between hope and fear? Now, the next thing, so that's purpose and feelings. The next thing is the pace of the conversation. Now, conversations always involve you and another person or a group of people. And there is one thing that you can control, and that's the pace. They may want to speed up the pace and push you. And you'll see in the dialogues, every now and then I do that with Corbyn. I put pressure on him by speeding up the pace. Other times I slow the pace down, and that encourages him to think more. And then he answers perhaps a question I've asked, and then I keep the pace slow. I just bounce it back and say, is that what you really think, Corbyn? See how the pace between those words, or I could have said, is that what you really think, Corbyn? So pace is really important. So give yourself, I recommend you never answer a question that you need to think about in less than 3 seconds. Try and give your subconscious 3 seconds to think what it wants your conscious mind to say. Because that way your conscious and your subconscious work in partnership, and you will become, as a person, a much more effective person. So it's a soft skill you have to learn about controlling the pace of a conversation in an environment where other people might be trying to control the pace. Usually, if they want something from you, they'll speed the pace up. If they're reluctant for you to get something from them, they'll slow the pace down. So think about pace. So that's purpose, feeling, pace. And the next thing is, think of the conversation as a journey. Now, the journeys have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Well, that's the way I suggest you think about it. I'm using analogies a bit here, but that's okay. So think about the beginning of a conversation. I mean, the obvious thing is a greeting. Hello, how are you? And then they reply, I'm fine today. Thank you very much. And then the next thing, you move the conversation on from the greeting into the body of the conversation, perhaps with a directed question. Do you really mean to park your car in my drive again? Or do you think you can think of a different solution for that? And then see what happens. I mean, that's just obviously an example of what might turn out to be a bit of a confrontational conversation if someone else is parking their car in your driveway. But it doesn't have to be confrontational. They may say, yeah, I had to do it. My mother's sick. I need to be able to get her into my car quickly and take her to the hospital. And you might well say, well, that's fine. Is there anything I can do to help you? And so what might have been a confrontation can turn into a real partnership. You might build a friendship with that person coming out of what initially may look like a pretty rubbish situation. So think about the middle of the conversation and then think about the end. How do you want to end that conversation? In this example, someone parked in your driveway, you found out why they were doing it, you feel compassionate about it. So when that conversation ends, you can end it cleverly. You can say, well, look, please let me know how your mother gets on at the hospital and if there's anything else I can do to help you. So you've ended the conversation in a really positive way. And there's other ways of ending a conversation, like, that was an absolute rubbish date, I never want to see you again, please don't call me. You can see that's slightly going down the other way. So the journey that you want from the conversation, you might hope it's going to be a wonderful date, or the situation that you're in according to the conversation you're having. So that's purpose, feeling, pace, and the journey. And then finally, before you even start a conversation, if you have a choice, if someone else starts it, you don't have a choice. But if you're going to start a conversation, think about your timing. Is this the right time? And is this the right place to have this particular conversation? If you're meeting someone for the first time, you should ask them perhaps, when would be convenient for us to meet? Rather than diving straight in there with, can I come and see you next Monday? Or whatever it may be. So think about the time. That'll be a win-win for both of you. And then think about the place. And when I did business, in my day, it was very common to have business meetings in a restaurant or something like that. Or perhaps invite people to a social event. In Russia, for example, it's very, very common to meet people socially and informally rather than in their offices. And in fact, I know people whose wives, I knew a guy and he got his wife, in Russia this is, to join the gym club and meet the wife of the guy that had the power that he really wanted to see. And so he engineered that situation. So his wife met the other guy's wife. They got on well. The other guy's wife invited her, along with him, to come to their house for a meeting or dinner or whatever. And that way he got in. He got under the wire. And in Russia, a lot of things are about power and that kind of indirect influence. Now, in the West, it's generally more obvious to call someone up and say, can I come and see you, and perhaps go to their office. But offices are a pretty rubbish way to do business, usually. It's happening more and more because people talk about the other kinds of meetings as corruption. They're not. They're actually an effort to break down the barriers of formality and get to an authentic conversation with someone, what they really think, what they really believe. And offices sometimes can actually stop that. So when I'm making arrangements for a meeting, I think very much about the time and the place. If it is a restaurant, I'll try and make sure it's a restaurant where I'm known, where I have a favorite table, where I know the head waiter's going to give me excellent service right from the very moment I walk through the door. So that's controlling the place. Now, of course, that was my world. You've got your own situation. But what I'm encouraging you to do is think of, if you can control the conversation, think of the time and the place. I'm going to summarize. You can probably tell for once it's not entirely impro. I have made a few notes. I've got purpose, feeling, pace, the journey, and the time and place. Think about those as you go forward. So to summarize, a conversation is a tool. It's a very useful tool. It's a tool you can use. And if you're not careful, it's a tool other people will use on you. Now, if they do, 9 times out of 10, they won't be conscious of all these soft skills aspects, but you will be. So from now on, if you practice skilled, purposeful conversation, you will find you can get more control over what's going on. And you can use that for for your own purposes, but also perhaps to make yourself happier and the other person happier. It's remarkable the difference you can make to another person if you really want to help them and you control that conversation in the right way. You can add real value. And I think that's what this whole process is about. It's taking conversation and moving it to some extent up from your subconscious, which is probably all about your authentic personality, moving some of the control into your conscious mind so that you can actually interact with people in an authentic way. And that's really what I'm after, is that I'm trying to help you achieve the authentic interaction that will make you feel within yourself happy to have had that conversation. Even if it was a tough one, you will walk out of that interview where you asked for more money and you will know whether or not they value you and whether or not you should stay there, or you may even walk out with the raise that you really wanted. So think about it, moving your conversation from subconscious a bit more into your conscious mind. Now, good luck with that. So this is the end of my Cyprus Tapes. I'm going to have to pack up some of what I've done here. I'm really putting it off. I shouldn't be putting it off. I've got to get flight information about snow and God knows what all else. So it's in my mind. I'd love to be doing more of this. Hopefully when I get back to the UK, I'll be able to find the energy and the inspiration to carry on. But meanwhile, if you have been watching these Cyprus tapes from the beginning to the end, I'd like to say thank you. I've enjoyed doing them. It's taken me a long time to be able to sort of get my thoughts in order to a sufficient level that I can do this. So it's been good for me, as has the sun and everything else about Cyprus. But I hope it's been good for you. If we do speak again and meet again, I'm looking forward to it. But if we don't, take what you can from this and the dialogues, if I get them edited and up onto the YouTube or the web. And to summarize, enjoy your life. Enjoy the interaction and the blending of your subconscious and your conscious, and become more of the person that you really are. And don't just become it within yourself. Using interpersonal dynamics and soft skills, let people see who you are and value you for what you are, and increase your effectiveness. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.